Blessed day, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to talk about another step under the conceptual phase of a quantitative research process. After formulating and delimiting the problem, here comes the review of related literature and studies. This presentation is structured in two parts. Part 1 is about selecting relevant review of related literature or RRL, and followed by the second section about citing review of literature using standard style. Let's begin the first part, selecting relevant RRL. The literature review is an important aspect in doing a research. With a wide range of materials to choose from, the researcher needs to select materials relevant to the study. Now, there are two main ways to do a literature search, which are using traditional paper approach and electronically by means of a computer. Let us have an overview of terms, or these are like the terms to remember. First, we have literature. It is an oral or written record of a man's significant experiences that are artistically conveyed in a prosaic manner. It is embodied in any literary works like essay, novel, journal, story, biography, etc. So they are man's best thoughts and feelings about the world. The next term, madalas yung naririnig when you are doing a research, review of related literature. It is an analysis of a man's written or spoken knowledge of the world. It is a detailed review of existing literature related to the topic of a thesis or dissertation. So in an RRL, we talk about knowledge and findings from existing literature relevant to your topic. So those are the two terms. Now let's talk about comprehensively what literature review is. So literature review or review of literature surveys books, scholarly articles, and any other sources relevant to a particular issue, area of research, or theory. And by so doing, it provides a description, summary, and critical evaluation of these works in relation to the research problem being investigated. So simply, pag sinabing literature review, we refer to a process of studying what has already been written on a particular topic. Naghahanap tayo ng mga materials, resources, and information related sa topic or problem na na-identify na natin prior, okay, nung past lesson natin for our research. Now, why is there a need to conduct a literature review in research? So Macmillan and Schumacher, 1984, identified five purposes of the literature review. It allows you to, number one, define and limit a problem. If your literature review is part of a larger research project, the literature review helps to identify the parameters of a study. Most research areas are broad, and a literature review allows identification of key issues within a broad research area so that a definition of an area of interest can be pursued. Second, it places your study in perspective. So the purpose of academic research is to push out and add to the current body of knowledge within a particular field. Unless you are aware of the work of others, you cannot build upon an established foundation. A literature review allows the researcher to say, the work of A, B, and C have discovered this much about my question. The investigations of D have added this much to our knowledge. I propose to go beyond this work in the following manner. So that's how we like um plan or like state our or put into a perspective our study. Now, number three, avoid unintentional replication of previous studies. This is the third purpose. Sometimes it is appropriate to replicate a previous study, but this should be done intentionally and for a particular purpose. A literature review helps you to make informed choices about a research topic within a scholarly context. Okay, so we do not want to um, replicate studies unintentionally. So if we are going to replicate a study, it must be done purposely. Okay, it must be done intentionally. Okay, to if you are going to replicate a study. Next, number four, select methods and measures. The success or failure of previous investigations can provide useful material for you when you are designing your own research methodology. You can assess what has worked before or not worked in previous contexts and why. So you may be alerted to new methodologies and procedures and different types of tests, technologies, and measures. And then number five, relate findings to previous knowledge and suggest areas for further research. The findings on one's own research need to be related back to earlier studies because these places one's work and can point to areas that need further investigation. The research is much more a coherent whole if your discussion section draws on and contrasts with the literature review. So that's um, another purpose of doing a lit review to relate findings to previous knowledge. Now, what are the different types of lit review? If you're going to read and look for the different types of literature review, you will find several answers. In our case, I just included two. The most common, we have traditional narrative review and systematic review. Now, very quickly, traditional or narrative, I'm sure you are more familiar to this. You identify and review published literature on a topic and employ a narrative approach to to reporting the review findings. So the scope of traditional or narrative review is um, kind of wide and comprehensive. And as a reviewer, you can choose studies purposefully, which is somewhat biased. No. Now, on the other hand, systematic review, as the name suggests, it is a kind of review that involves systematic search for, appraise, and synthesize research evidence. So the goal of systematic review is to deliberately document, critically evaluate, and summarize scientifically all of the research about a clearly defined research problem. This one is commonly used by professionals such as those working on their master's thesis. So tayo in the undergraduate, most of the time we are using traditional or narrative review. Now, what are the characteristics of a good lit review? So these characteristics can serve as criteria in selecting materials for a review of literature. Number one, materials must be as recent as possible. This is important because of the changes that are going on. You have to look for literature or studies published or created 5 years backward. That is the desired. No, that is that is desirable. You have to look for literature or studies published 5 years backward. If now is 2022, it should be 2017 up to present. So yun dapat yung mga materials na i-include nyo in your study or in your literature. Those that are published um, 2017 up to date or up to present. Number two, materials must be as objective and unbiased as possible. Avoid data and materials which are extremely one-sided. You have to be objective and you have to show the two sides of the coin if you are going to uh, conduct a literature review. Number three, materials must be relevant to the study, definitely. Whatever kind of materials is needed to explain or support the study, it must have a bearing on the topic. It must be relevant. Number four, materials must not be too few and not too many. Use your discretion, okay, as researchers on how much or many to include, but there should be enough materials included for the researcher to be able to offer insights on the study. The availability of materials will also be a determining factor. Baka kasi yung study mo naman is that talagang konti pa lang yung nako-conduct na or yung may mga prior studies in literature. So, that can also be a factor. Next, let's talk about the types of sources. So in this slide, what am I citing? I just included here the different terms that we usually use as our materials or ways in searching for relevant literature, such as journal, film, magazines, newspaper, computer, okay, ayun, newspaper. Now, this is just an FYI, no? Just like what I mentioned earlier, in this digital age, the most familiar way to us nowadays is electronically using a computer. Paper approach, we have journal and thesis or dissertation in our library. So let's talk the types of sources. First, we have primary sources. So publications in which researchers report the results of their studies that can be considered as a primary source. So findings are communicated by the authors directly to the readers. So meaning kung sino yung gumawa, siya yung nag-communicate directly of the result. That's why it's primary. Most materials that fall under this type are journals, which are usually published monthly, quarterly, or biannually. Now, other examples are autobiography, speeches, diaries, interviews. Next, we have secondary sources. These are publications in which authors describe the work of others. Again, publications in which authors describe the work of others. So textbook is a familiar example of this type. This is also used for different courses offered in the curriculum. Other examples are encyclopedias, research reviews, review articles, and yearbooks. Now, note on the use of secondary sources. A word of caution on the use of secondary sources. You have to try to keep their use to a minimum by getting hold of and reading the primary source. So primary sources definitely contain more information, which allows you to critically evaluate and interpret the information yourself rather than relying on another author's second-hand and possibly biased account. Okay? So it is acceptable to use secondary sources if, letter A, you can't get hold of the original source. For example, it may be out of print. Letter B, the original source is in a language you can't understand. And then letter C, the original is very complex. For example, some statistical journal articles can be hard getting. So these are examples wherein secondary sources are acceptable or a secondary source is acceptable. Otherwise, we should, our top priority is to use primary sources or primary source of information or literature or studies. Okay, so next, moving forward, conducting a review of literature na tayo. So how do we now conduct a review of literature? The review of related literature is a systematic process which composed of three steps or stages. That is after the identification of your topic, of course. So stage one, in conducting a review of lit is about finding relevant materials, or this is where we search for literature. Stage 2 is the actual reading, and stage 3 is about note taking. Let's discuss each. Stage 1 muna tayo, the search for the literature. So it involves the skill of identifying documents to be reviewed which are not limited to books and research journals. It can also include articles, abstracts, reviews, monographs, dissertations, historical records, statistical handbooks, conference proceedings, government reports that can also be used, other research reports, and electronic media. So for this stage, a stage of RRL, where you devote much of your time in looking for sources to answer your research questions or to support your assumptions. So that is stage one, searching for the literature. So it will take much of your time in conducting your research. Now, since any person is free to use the internet for displaying information that is peer-reviewed or not, you need to be careful in evaluating online sources. So definitely, ang kukuhanin lang nating literature or studies are yung peer-reviewed, meaning it was it undergo or undergone critic by professionals. Okay, it was published and reviewed by professionals or other researchers. So we have to be careful sa mga sites na ginagamit natin in searching for the literature. So you can have access to various sources of data in two methods. Ito nabanggit ko na kanina, manually, that is getting hold of the printed form of the material. If, for example, pupunta kayo sa library, sa mga school ninyo, so you can get hold of that printed material. Okay? Yung mga thesis natin or yung mga dissertation there. Okay? And other encyclopedias, newspapers, magazines. So, that can be printed material. So, that's manual or that's a method under manual. Second, you have electronically. This is having a computer or online reading of the sources of knowledge. So ito, this is more common now, definitely, because sa digital age na nga tayo, can use computer to search online and look for sa mga databases. Okay, doon tayo naghahanap ng mga published researches. Okay, so pointers you have to remember in searching for the best sources of information or data. So number one, choose previous research findings that are closely related to your research. You have to give more weight to studies done by people possessing expertise or authority in the field of knowledge to which the research studies belong. Number three, consider sources of knowledge that refer more to primary data than to secondary data. I already mentioned this. And then prefer getting information from peer-reviewed materials. So yung mga na-review nga ng mga professionals than from general reading materials. So yun yung mga pointers to remember in searching for the best sources of information or data. Now, ito yung mga sample kong may bibigay sa inyo that I also use when I search for literature review. I will be having a separate video on how you can search and how you can download the materials, okay, researches online. So I will send to you that video on how you can do that. So this one, you can use Google Scholar. So this is the link for that. So yan, tatype ka lang here ng keywords more ng terms na pwede mong gamitin for your study. And then, ayan, lalabas yung mga pwedeng related results. For example, this one is related to your topic. You just click the link. You have to click this link and then it will direct you to another window. So, nasa ERIC ka na ngayon. So, ERIC or ERIC, it is a most, I mean, it is common, it's a common database na ginagamit natin. This one is peer-reviewed. Okay, ERIC or Education Resources Information Center. For example, nandito ka na and this topic is relevant sa study mo, you just download full text and then you will be directed to another window and then ito na siya. And then you can download na this one. Okay? Again, I have a separate discussion for this. Another website na you can use or database you can use is the EBSCO host. So ito may logins dito, may login na kailangan dito. So you need to secure the user ID and password sa inyong university for you to be able to search for researches here. So yun, after mo ma-insert or ma-encode yung iyong user ID and password, just click login and then continue lang. And then dito na yung inyong keywords mo na pwedeng related to your topic. Okay? Or variables na under investigation mo. Just type in here. Tapos click search and then ayan. So lalabas yung inyong yung mga related topics na relevant or I mean that can be relevant to your topic or to your study. And then, for example, this one, so under, for example, hinanap mo, or yung mga possible results na related to your study. And ito, for example, yung nakita mo na possible na pwedeng maging, literature. So you just click here, full text from Eric. Tapos you will be directed again to another window. Tapos ito na uli siya, download full text. And then, ito na yung pinaka-text niya or pinaka-document. Okay, so yun. And this one is another example. Now, other sources, pwedeng sa academia.edu, Science Direct, may login sa Science Direct. You need to secure if ever meron ang inyong university. And then doaj.org. So these are just some resources na you can use. Now, websites introducing materials whose quality depends solely on every individual. Social media networks like Twitter, Facebook, blogs, podcasts, YouTube, video, okay, etc. And other online encyclopedias such as Wikipedia, they are not as dependable as the other sources of knowledge. Okay? Yung mga nabanggit ko na yon, Twitter, Facebook, blogs, podcasts, YouTube, Wikipedia, they are not as dependable as sa mga na-discuss ko na to, sa mga sources na to. Ito mga binigay kong sources, they are peer-reviewed and you can rest assured na um, they are scholarly. Okay, they are peer-reviewed talaga. Okay, so some consider the information from yun na nga, Twitter, Facebook, blogs, podcasts, YouTube, and Wikipedia as not very scholarly in weight because it is susceptible to anybody's liking for editing. Okay? Kasi na-edit siya. Yung mga information na yung mga, the information na galing sa mga sites na yon. Okay, so ang gagamitin lang na resources ay yung mga sinabi ko. And again, basta alam nyo na magbibigay pa ako sa inyo ng other list. Marami pa yan. Okay, so yung mga galing sa Scopus, so you can also use that. So I'll give you more list para mas marami kayong magamit in searching for your literature. Okay, so that's stage 1. So you have to search for the literature. The second stage is reading the source material. So reading, understanding, or making the materials meaningful to you is what will preoccupy you on the second stage of reading the RRL. On top of this should be your ability to criticize or evaluate, apply, and create things about what you have read. Hence, reading or making sense of the source materials does not only make you list down the ideas from the materials, but also permits you to modify, construct, or reconstruct ideas based on a certain principle, theory, pattern, method, or theme underlying your research. So, napakahalaga ng you understand what you read kasi what magiging useless lang din yung mga na-download nyo na literature and studies if you do not know how to critically evaluate or appraise yung mga materials na nakuha nyo. You have to make sense of those materials or literature and studies na makukuha nyo. So, yun yung stage 2. So, it's about reading, you make sense of your materials, and evaluate, critically appraise those literature. So, stage 3 is about note taking. This is the last step of the RRL, or Review of Related Literature. So, this one is for the stage 3 note taking. So, one of the characteristics of a good researcher is being systematic. He or she must establish a system of note taking to save time and effort. The researcher must take notes, putting only the important data in his or her own words. Now, it is suggested that the researcher prepare index cards on which he or she can take down notes before gathering or searching for reference materials for the review literature. So the note-taking process is useful, especially when the researcher is already synthesizing and compiling ideas from the different references. Note-taking facilitates consolidation of the literature gathered. And that and those are the stages of conducting literature review. Okay, so you have stage 1, you search for the relevant related literature and studies. Stage 2 is about reading, okay, making sense of what you have gathered or downloaded. And then number 3 is about note taking. So that comprised the first part of our presentation or of our topic today. Now, we are going to begin the second part, which is citing related literature using standard style. So let's start. One important skill that you need to learn when writing the literature review is proper citation. Okay, this is to avoid plagiarism in your research work. In reviewing related literature, you come to read varieties of reading materials containing knowledge related to your research. And it is a fact that these ideas, including the language structures to express these ideas, belong to other people. They are not yours. One cardinal principle in research is acknowledging or recognizing the owners of any form of knowledge you intend to include in your research paper. The following now are the three terms used to express for your appreciation for or recognition of people's ownership of borrowed ideas. First, we have acknowledgement. So, the beginning portion of the work that identifies individuals who have contributed something for the production of the paper. So, yung acknowledgement, na-discuss ko to, di ba, it's part of your preliminary page. So, this is where you appreciate those people or individual na nag-contribute in accomplishing your research study. Next, you have number 2, references or bibliography. So it's a complete list of all reading materials, including books, journals, periodicals, etc., from where the borrowed ideas came from. So this can be found at the end of the book or thesis. So later, we have a separate discussion for references or bibliography. How do you write and cite your references? Number three, citation or in-text citation. So these are references within the main body of the text, specifically in review of related literature. So we have two types of in-text citation or the citation itself. In parenthetical citations, so that's the first parenthetical citation. So the author name and publication date appear in parentheses, separated by comma. Okay, so example, falsely balanced news coverage can distort the public's perception of expert consensus on an issue. So ito yung statement and this came from Cooler 2016. So this is an example of parenthetical citation. So ibig sabihin, the author name at saka yung publication date, ito yung author name, at yung publication date or the year published, separated by comma, they are in parentheses. Okay, nakahiwalay siya sa pinaka, I mean, parang naka parenthesis nga yung pinaka surname niya ng author and the published date. So this is parenthetical citation. Next, you have the narrative citations. So the author name is incorporated into the text as part of the sentence. And the year follows in parentheses. Okay? So ito, medyo iba rin to. So you have the author name here. This is incorporated sa pinaka text or part of the sentence. Pero yung year ay naka-parentheses. So yung year lang yung naka-parentheses pero the name, the surname is part of the sentence. So let's read the example. Cooler, then parenthesis, 2016, noted the dangers of falsely balanced news coverage. So this is an example of a narrative citations. So itong parenthetical citation, this is also tinatawag nating non-integral citation. Okay, non-integral citation. And the stress kasi is given to the piece of information rather than to the owner of the ideas. Pero still, sinite natin kung kanino nanggaling yung idea. Pero we are giving more emphasis sa information. Okay? That is for the non-integral or the parenthetical citation. On the other hand, si narrative citation naman, this can also be termed as integral citation. And dito, we use active verbs. And in our example, we use noted. Other active verbs na ginagamit natin is like report, like claim, assert, or state. For example, Cooler 2016 asserted the dangers of, or claimed the dangers of, or stated. Okay, so we use active verbs. So we use narrative or integral citation if we would like to report the author's ideas or we would like to give emphasis na the idea came from this author. Okay? So that's the main difference between parenthetical and narrative citation. In rare cases, the author tsaka yung date might both appear in the narrative. Ibig sabihin, wala tayong parentheses. So, in this case, do not use, yun na nga, we do not have parentheses. Example, in 2016, hindi ko lang na ilagay rito. For example na lang, in 2016, Cooler noted the dangers of falsely balanced news coverage. So, without any parentheses. So, that can also be used, okay? That can also be part of the in-text citation. Okay? Pero most common, more often than not, we use parenthetical citation or narrative citation. So ito pala yon. This one, ito pala siya, yung sinasabi ko. So in rare cases, ito, the author and date might both appear in the narrative. So we do not use parentheses like in 2016. The Cooler noted the dangers of falsely balanced news coverage. So, naka-integrated siya sa ating statement or sa sentence. Now, what are the different purposes of citation? Number one, to give importance and respect to other people for what they know about the field. Two, to give authority, validity, and credibility to other people's claims, conclusions, and arguments. To prove your broad and extensive reading of authentic and relevant materials about your topic. Four, to help readers find or contact the sources of ideas easily. To permit readers to check the accuracy of your work. And lastly, to save yourself from plagiarism. Now, what is plagiarism? Madalas natin naririnig when we are conducting research, plagiarism. So it is an act of quoting or copying the exact words of the writer and passing the quoted words off as your own words. So the leading act of plagiarism is using the words of the original text in expressing your understanding of the reading material. Now, the right way to avoid plagiarism is to express the borrowed ideas in your own words. So, pwede ka mag-paraphrase, pwede ka rin mag-summarize. Okay? If you want these words to appear in your paper, you must also reveal the name of the author in your paper, including the pieces of information such as title, date, place of publication, publisher, etc. about the book from where you copied the words. At ito yung pag-uusapan natin or pag-aaralan natin. How do you cite and reference properly? That is to avoid plagiarism. So take note of this. Everything you have cited in text appears in your reference list, and then likewise, everything that appears in your reference list will have been cited in text. So ibig sabihin kung ano yung meron ka sa iyong citation in the body of your text, or kung ano yung meron ka in your in-text citation, dapat makikita sila sa references mo or your reference list. And then, likewise, kung ano yung nasa reference list mo, yung nasa references section, dapat nagamit mo sila in the body of your text or in your in-text citation or in your citation. Okay, either parenthetical man yan or yung narrative natin. So, I hope clear tayo doon. Now, let's talk about referencing styles and in research. So, we are going to talk about first in-text citation. Paano ba yung ating ano-ano yung mga referencing styles in research when we talk about in-text citation. So we have there are many different style guys that are followed by researchers. However, the three most common styles followed at present are the MLA or the Modern Language Association style, the American Psychological Association or the APA style, and the Chicago style or Turabian. Remember, we do not mix or combine itong mga referencing style na sinabi natin. You only use one. Okay? We cannot combine these styles, these different styles. So, I will just show you this information for MLA. So, this is just an FYI since our focus naman is the APA. Yung gagamitin natin, again, is the APA referencing style. So, Modern Language Association, or MLA, is an American professional organization for scholars of literature and language based in New York City. So, nakapag-publish sila na kanilang first edition last 1985 and third edition last 2008. So, commonly used, ginagamit yan sa liberal arts and humanities discipline. The MLA format follows the author page method. Okay, of in-text citation. And this is the example. Okay, you have the author, tapos yung page kung saan nakita. yung information na yon or saan nanggaling yung, I mean the page number where the idea came from. So instead of author surname and year of publication, this style uses the author's last name and page number. So yun na nga yun. Okay, author's um, last name at saka page number. And then we have here in the citation where it is lifted, dapat, I mean the complete bibliographic information must appear sa works cited page. So kasi for the APA, okay, ang pinaka bibliography is oftentimes tinatawag na references. Now for MLA, ang tawag sa kanya is works cited, yung pinaka bibliography niya. Okay? So, commonly, ang tinatawag dito is works cited. That's the term that they use. So, yan, that is for MLA. Anyway, again, para lang malaman nyo na that is MLA for comparison lang, ano? So, we now proceed to the APA, or the American Psychological Association, originated in 1929 when a group of psychologists, anthropologists, and business managers convened and sought to establish a simple set of procedures or style rules that would codify the many components of scientific writing to increase the ease of reading comprehension. So, ang first edition nila that was published in 1952, and then their latest edition, the seventh edition, the APA referencing style, was published last October 2019. So, it follows the author date system of citation. Kung si MLA, author page method, si APA, author date system. So, for example, Avila 2009. So, author, that is the surname of the author, and then the date published, yung kanyang work. So, for example, Avila 2009, separated by comma. So again, the bibliographic information should appear in the references o kaya reference list, yung term na ginagamit ni APA for the bibliographic information. So, emphasis is placed on the author and the date of a piece of work to uniquely identify it, that is for the APA. And nowadays, regardless of their area of specialization, the most preferred is the APA style format. Okay, so we now proceed to the referencing style na meron si APA. How do we now cite using APA format? For example, we have work by single author. So this is how we cite using the APA. The last name of the author and the year of publication are placed in text. Okay? So when the name of the author is part of the narrative, only the date is placed in the parentheses, just like this example. So the name of the author is part of the narrative, kaya yung ating date is naka-parentheses. Okay, so this is a narrative citation. Santos, and then parentheses 2014 asserted that. So this is integral citation or the narrative citation na tinawag natin kanina. Next, when single author, ibig sabihin isang author lang siya. So when both information are in parentheses naman, the year is separated from the surname with a comma, such as this example. So you have the statement here, or the idea, and then naka-parentheses siya. Pareho, si author's surname, and then the published year, and then separated by comma. So again, this is parenthetical citation, di ba? Or non-integral citation, yung tawag natin kanina. So that's the first. That is a work by a single author. Now, paano kapag dalawang authors na? So you have name both authors in the signal phrase or in the parentheses each time you cite the work. So pag two authors, kapag isa-cite mo yung work nila, dapat parehong pangalan nila yung ilalagay mo. And then you use the word and, yung and between the author's names within the text, and use the ampersand naman, meaning this symbol, in the parentheses. Okay? So again, this is a narrative citation. Ito naman yung ating parenthetical citation. Okay, so Santos and Reyes. So, yung word na and ang ginagamit natin, tapos naka-parenthesis pa rin yung year, and that is for the um, narrative. Now, for parenthetical citation, parehong yung pangalan ng dalawang authors. Sa loob ng parenthesis, we use the ampersand, the symbol for and, tapos comma, tapos yung published year or the date. So this is an example kapag ka work by two authors. So when entering more than one author in in-text citation within the same parenthesis, enter them in the same order as it appears on their work. So kung paano sila nag-appear doon sa pinagkuhanan mo ng literature or studies or sa pinaka-document, you just copy how it exactly appears doon. Okay? So that is work by two authors. Next natin, we have work by 3 to 5 authors. By the way, this is the style that I am discussing now is the 6th edition. APA 6th edition to. Though we have now 7th edition, may similarities pa rin naman with the 6th edition. Later, sa pinaka-last slides, you will see there yung updates, yung mga naiba for the 7th edition. Okay? So again, what I'm discussing here are the guidelines or the APA referencing style 6th edition format. So work by 3 to 5 authors. So you just have to list all the authors in the signal phrase or in parentheses the first time you cite the source. And then use word and between the author's name within the text and use the ampersand in the parentheses. So again, narrative, tapos ito yung parenthetical citation. So um, ilalagay lang natin yung, kung 3 to 5 authors yan, ilagay lang lahat ng pangalan nila, tapos naka-parentheses yung published year. So kung parenthetical, ganun pa rin, include all the names, ampersand yung gagamitin, separated by comma, and then the year. Ngayon, kapag na-cite mo na sila the first time, in your subsequent citation, if for example, isa-cite mo uli yan, you just have to only use the first author's last name, followed by et al. In the signal phrase or parenthesis. So, ang gagamit mo na lang, yung unang surname lang sa kanila, and then, it will be followed by et al. Example. So, ito ay parenthetical. So, David, tapos et al. Tuldok, and then comma, the published year. Okay, kung ano naman yan, narrative. So, ganun din, David, tapos et al. Naka-parenthesis, nakahiwalay lang yung published year. Okay, so again, pag unang citation mo sa kanila, dapat lahat ng pangalan mabanggit mo. Pero the next time you cite them, yung first author na lang, tapos et al. Na. Again, pag 7th edition, mamaya you will see the update. Okay, kung ano yung difference. Next, work by 6 or more authors. Now, kapag 6 or more authors na, use the first author's name na followed by et al. In the signal phrase or parentheses. Example, again, kung 6 or more, 7, 8, 9, 10 authors, you do not have to write all the names. Kahit first time pa, you do not have to write all the names. Instead, agad-agad na yung pinaka-authors, yung first author surname lang, tapos followed by et al. Na agad. Okay? Kasi dito, di ba, the first times, kung 3 to 5 authors, yung first time natin silang sinite, binanggit natin yung hanggang yung 3 na to, or yung 4 hanggang 5. And then, the next time, et al. Na. Ngayon, pag 6 or more authors, immediately Macmillan et al. Na agad. Gagamit na agad tayo ng et al. Even first time pa lang natin sila ibabanggitin. Okay? And then for the parenthetical, ganun din. So, surname, tapos et al. Na agad, tapos 2004. By the way, et al. Means and others. Okay? Or and colleagues. Sabi sabihin, si Macmillan and colleagues 2014 argued that. Okay? So that's it. Now, kung an unknown author naman, if the work does not have an author, cite the source by its title in the signal phrase or use the first word or two in the parentheses. So, titles of books and reports are italicized or underlined. Again, kung books yan and reports, naka-italicized or naka-underline. Okay, so example natin, a similar study was done of students learning to format research papers. So ito, parenthetical. So since unknown yung author dito, so again, kung titles of articles, chapters, and web pages, they are in quotation marks. So naka-quotation mark to, so probably it can be an article or a chapter. Okay? So using APA, that is a phrase, I mean that can be ang nakita natin na ano na so that is the title. No, we do not know who the author is. So we just use the title. So using APA, comma, and then naka-ano, no, quotation mark, comma, 2011. Now, in rare cases, we use the anonymous, okay? The term anonymous is used for the author. Treat it as the author's name. So kung wala tayong author talaga, minsan hindi natin ginagamit yung title ng article. So we use the term anonymous itself. So anonymous, comma, 2001. That is kung hindi natin alam yung name of the author. Now, there are cases na hindi naman natin alam yung date kung kailan na-publish. So if that is the case, nilalagay naman natin N, period, tsaka D, no date. For example, hindi natin alam yung date na to. So nilalagay natin anonymous, comma, tapos no date. Pero usually may pangalan na tayo, ano, hindi na anonymous yun. So for example, Manaloto, comma, tapos din natin alam yung date. So N period D. So ibig sabihin no date. We do not know when it was published. Next, organization as an author. So there are times na the organization yung sinasite natin, di ba? The name of the organization. So if the author is an organization or a government agency, we have to mention the organization in the signal phrase or in parenthetical citation the first time you cite the source. Complete name dapat the first time you cite the source. Example, sa first citation, halimbawa, according to the Department of Trade and Industry, parenthesis 2007, sa second citation natin, pwede mo na siyang i-abbreviate. Halimbawa, DTI na, comma, 2017. Mahalaga na the first time we cite the organization, complete dapat yung name niya. And then the next time na we cite, we can now use the abbreviation. Next, two or more references within the same parenthesis, and this one is in-text citation. Order the citations of two or more works by different authors with the same parenthesis alphabetically in the same order in which they appear and reference this. Separate the citations with semicolons. So example, several studies tapos naka parenthesis na tayo, parenthetical citation. So Miller, 1999, that's one author. Okay, that is one work already. And then we have another work na same or na binabanggit natin. Example, Shafransky and Mahoney, 1998. So we just separate them with a semicolon. Okay, semicolon lang, we separate them. Okay? And then, ayun. alphabetically, naka-alphabetize sila in the same order sa reference list. So note only the major findings, ideas, generalizations, principles, or conclusions in related materials relevant to the problem should be cited. So a material may be quoted if the idea conveyed is so perfectly stated and is not too long. So pwede kang mag-quote. Okay? Ibig sabihin, per se, or you copied the exact words or statements per se. So, i-quote mo siya. That is, and then yung, kung hindi masyadong mahaba, we can do that. So, this is an example. According to Felipe, tapos i-ano lang natin siya, quote unquote. Okay, quote and unquote after. So, this is the statement. Okay, the exact wordings, and then the citation, Felipe 2015. Okay, so, ayan. So again, a material, kinu-quote natin siya if the idea conveyed is perfectly stated, tsaka it is not too long. Okay, you do not want to, for example, change the words or the statement itself. So you may do that. We do direct quotation if necessary. Okay, so that is for the in-text citation. So those are the guidelines from the American Psychological Association how to cite kapag ito ay in-text citation. Next, we have, by the way, dito yung dash niya, no? In tapos dash tapos text. In text. Tapos wala ito, in text citation. So, in tapos dash text citation. So, di ko na na-edit. Next we have, so after that, the in-text citation, we are now going to talk about reference list naman. Again, this is for the APA format. Reference list. How do we format our reference list using APA? So pag sinabing reference list, it consists of all sources cited in the text of a paper. So, dito natin nilalagay lahat ng sources na ginamit natin sa ating paper. Okay, lahat ng in-text citation nilalagay natin sa reference list. Bibliography may include resources that were consulted but not cited in the text as well as annotated description of each one. So, bibliographies may be organized chronologically or by subject rather than alphabetically. So, dito kinumpare lang si reference list versus bibliography. For the APA, we are using reference list. Okay, so ito yung ginagamit natin. So reference list is the list of the sources you use in your paper. So place list at the end of your paper. So nilalagay natin to at the end of chapter 5, pagtapos na tayo sa ating research. Pero kung proposal sa chapter 3, at the end of chapter 3, doon natin siya nilalagay. So observe the following. Title your list of sources as references. That's the title. And then list your sources alphabetically by author's surname. So naka-alphabetically arrange yung ating references. Okay? Naka-double space yung reference list, and then end every entry with a period. Tapos nakahanging indent siya, no? Reference list is nakahanging indent tayo. Later, I'll show an example. So ito, this is one of the guidelines. So we now talk the guidelines. We're now going to discuss the guidelines for the references or reference list of the APA. Again, 6th edition pa rin to. Now, for journal article na naka-print siya, journal na you have a copy manually. So, this is how we format our reference list. So, journal article in print, last name, comma, initial, tuldok, and then parenthesis, the year published, period, the article title, period, journal name, italicized, comma, volume number to, naka-italicize, tapos issue, naka-parenthesis, comma, pages, and then period. So you have to take note itong mga comma, period, the parenthesis, and then the italics, yung naka-italics or italicized na journal name, tsaka yung volume. Okay? You have to follow that format. So ito yung example natin. Kung one author, example, Carol, comma, M, tapos period B, period. So that would mean na dalawa yung initials niya. And then you have the published year, parenthesis, tapos tuldok. Title, the journal title, college students' use of effective and social language learning strategies, a classroom-based research, and a tuldok. Tapos the name of the journal, Philippine ESL Journal, comma, volume number is 5. So wala tayong walang issue number. For example, ito, naka-parenthesis si issue number. So probably baka walang issue number to. So we only have the volume number, tapos comma, pages 22 to 37. Pero kung may volume number, naka-parenthesis siya dito, and then the volume number. So ito may example tayo na may volume number. So two authors to. So notes, comma, the initials, H, G, tapos ampersand ang ginagamit natin kapag dalawa siya, and, has pay, comma, M, period, the published year, period, the title of the journal, tapos tuldok, the name of the journal, Social Science Quarterly, comma, the volume number, tapos the issue number, ayan, 1, comma, and then the pages. So 110 to 121. Again, this journal article in print. Now, this is kapag tatlo yung authors. So, just the same, you just include yung pangatlong author. Okay, so journal article online naman, for example, yung journal na nakuha mo is online. Okay, you use online databases, tapos download mo lang siya online. So, ito yung format dyan. So, last name, comma, initial, year published, article title, journal name, volume, almost the same. So magkakaroon lang siya ng DOI. Okay, DOI or retrieve from, tapos yung URL, tapos yung number, yung XXS. XXX here is a number, no? By the way, when you say DOI, we mean a unique alphanumeric string assigned to identify content and provide a persistent link to its location on the internet. DOI means digital object identifiers. Tapos yung URL naman, this is, we call this as Uniform Resource Locator. It is a unique identifier used to locate a resource on the internet. So you either use DOI or CURL, either of the two. Only one, wag na yung both. You just only use one. So that is for the online. You have to provide the DOI number or the URL number. So this one is an example. Kung one author, so just the same, magkakaroon lang tayo dito ng DOI. So ilalagay nyo lang yung DOI dyan. Again, this is the volume 68, issue number 3, and then the page. Okay, so ganito kung paano natin nilalagay yung ating references, no? Alphabetized, alphabetically arranged yan. You have the section or the name here, the label, references, naka-bold. Tapos ito, nakahanging indent yung ating format. And then we just follow yung sinabi ko or yung guideline na meron tayo. Kung journal in print man yan, kung journal online, okay? Kung book yan, kung magazine, YouTube, or any source. So, you just follow the format or guideline na meron dito. Okay? Nadi-discuss pa natin. So, ito yun. This is how it looks like. Okay? So next, when citing a reference another researcher has cited, or you need to refer to a work that has been cited in a paper you have read, but not the work cited, then the cited work is only referred to as part of the in-text citation. The reference list is for the paper you have read. Example, ito yung in-text natin. O'Reilly, as cited in Brime 2008, argues that, so ito yung in-text, yung nakita natin sa, yung ginamit natin sa pinaka chapters 1 to 5 natin, kung saan man siya lumabas doon. For reference list, ang gagamitin natin is si Brime. Okay? Kung ano yung um, ginamit nating reference. So, ganito yung gagawin natin kapag ka meron tayong as cited in, kung kanino man siya sinite. Okay, so ginagamit lang natin yung nagsa-cite tayo sa in-text. Pero for the reference list, ang ginagamit natin na citation is yung paper that you have read. Next, books in print. Kung manual or you have the book itself. Reference list format, you have the last name, comma, first initial, and then parenthesis the year, tapos book title, colon, subtitle, tapos you have the edition here, comma, place, kung saan siya na-publish, and then colon, you have the publisher. And then you have here the sample. So these are the names of the authors, publish year, the title of the book, tapos yung edition niya, 5th edition, period. Where it is published, Quezon City, comma, publisher, Lorimar Publishing Incorporated. Okay, so this is an example of books in print. Next, you have books, electronic version naman, meaning online. If possible, you use DOI over URL. Okay, so ito yung format kapag books, electronic version. Okay, so yan. I'll just show you and give you a copy of this format or guidelines. Please follow na lang the referencing based on what resource or source that you have. Kung book man yan, kung online yan, nakastipulate dito yung format na you have to follow. So, please observe na lang and use this format in your reference, okay, for writing your reference list. So ito kapag thesis or dissertation, so this is how you do your format for that. I have your example, so please take note na lang. Now we have thesis or dissertation kung unpublished siya, tapos print version. So ayan, please take note of the format. And then YouTube videos, this is how we format our YouTube videos using the APA format. So yan, please take note. And then for the website, ayan, this is also our example. Ebooks, if you're going to use ebooks, also we have a specific format for that. Magazine article, ito siya, and encyclopedia. So ito naman how we cite or we format the reference list for encyclopedia. So ito, I just have here an example. So kung ito ay journal from Science Direct, so this is just an example. Okay, ito yung na-discuss natin kanina. Just show you an example again. So this one, another example. And by the way, if for example, nasa Google ka at ikaw ay magsa-cite sa iyong reference list, to make it easier for you, sometimes meron kang makikitang naka-quote dito. This is in Google Scholar. So may naka-quote dyan na symbol na ganito. You can click that symbol and then pagka-click mo, lalabas yung kung paano siya i-cite, how you're going to cite that article or that journal. Magbibigay siya either MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, Vancouver. So definitely ang gagamitin mo or yung copy mo is si APA. So hindi ka na mahihirapang um, i-cite sa reference list kung paano siya. Kasi provided na siya, sometimes makikita mo siya or more often than not, makikita mo talaga siya. Okay, given siya sa online or sa database na pagkukuhanan mo. You just have to look for this one. Okay, so you copy this, tapos ilagay mo na siya sa reference list mo. Basta isa-cite mo siya, you are going to use or cite that author or that paper. Now, ito yung other tips pa in writing literature review. So, a good approach to writing an excellent review is adopting good opening sentences of articles that should chronologically appear in the paper. So, opening an article with a bibliographical list that begins with the author's name, like the following example, is not good. So, ito, hindi, when you open your statement using the names of the authors agad, di raw siya good. Okay? It's not good. Example, Aquino, tapos 2016 said, Rojas 2017 said, Mendoza asserted. Okay? So examples of better article openings manifesting critical thinking through analysis, comparison, and contrast of ideas and findings are as follows. So ito yung better opening na pwede nyong gamitin. So maglalagay ka um, ng mga article openings. Okay, like one early work by Castro 2017 proves that. So hindi ka nagsimula sa author agad, sa name agad ng author. Hindi yung Castro 2017 proves that. So hindi siya, that is not desirable. So what is suggested to you is ganito. Okay, so you have to have an article opening. So one early work by Castro, the latest study by, another study on the topic by, so yan yung ating mga examples. Tapos, coming from various books on the literature review, writing are the following transitional devices and active verbs to link or express author's ideas in your paper. So, gamit kayo ng mga similar, ng different words. Okay? Yung mga synonyms. Para hindi pare-pareho yung ginagamit yung mga verbs. Okay? Mga active verbs. So for words that link similar ideas or opinions, you can use additionally, similarly, similar opinion. So iba-ibahin nyo yung terms na ginagamit. Ano? Now for differing ideas and results, however, ito yung mga pwede. However, conversely, on the other hand, a contrasting opinion, a different approach, in comparison. So, yan yung mga pwedeng gamitin if you are going to contrast or compare ideas. Okay? So, other transitional devices, nevertheless, moreover, consequently, furthermore, further, etc. Okay? So, you play with words, you use different words. Huwag pa ulit-ulit na active verbs ang ginagamit or wag paulit-ulit yung transitional devices. So, ito pa yung mga active verbs na pwede nyong gamitin. Remember, your review must be formal, academic. So, keep your writing clear and concise. Tapos, aim to be objective and respectful of others' opinions. Use words tactfully. So those are the other tips pa in writing your literature review. So we are done with how do we cite, how do we reference, or I mean, how do we use referencing style, and in our case, we use the APA 6th edition format. Ngayon, as mentioned a while back, we have APA 7th edition na, and these are the updates. So again, I'll just give you this information. So please take note and follow. I think for the EAC, we are using the 6th edition pa yung pinapagamit sa inyo. Now, if you need to change or use the 7th edition for the APA, so ito naman siya. Okay, so I'll just provide you this information. So these are the changes from the 6th edition. Ito na yung mga update for the 7th edition, APA format. Okay, so please be guided accordingly. So that ends my presentation. That ends this lesson. So if you have questions, I will see you in our next synchronous meeting. Thank you and God bless.